Hello and welcome to another episode of Heywood and Stuff. Today we're going to be talking about relationships and ADHD. More specifically, people with ADHD in relationships and people that don't have ADHD but are in a relationship with someone who does have ADHD. Having ADHD is complicated. It's not a simple disorder to have. There are many other disorders out there that are equally, if not more, difficult to bear with, but it is definitely understated that ADHD is difficult. It's a day-to-day struggle and it comes with a host of complications. I do not want to come across as biased to those with ADHD in a relationship because I know that for those that do not have ADHD, it must be very difficult also. I think it's important just to keep in mind those that don't have ADHD, this is a disorder. It's not something that is chosen, and the list of symptoms that the person with the ADHD has is not made up. It is not invented. It is in no way glorified and is definitely not fun to have. If you don't have ADHD and you're with someone that does have ADHD, it would be fair for you to misinterpret the symptoms as your lover being lazy or careless, selfish or annoying or egocentric. All these things unfortunately do come across from ADHDers, but it's not something they can particularly help. They can manage and cope, but let's emphasize the word cope. They are coping. Just as difficult as it is for the person without ADHD to be in the relationship with the ADHD, it is also extremely difficult for the person with ADHD. Now, not only is it difficult for someone with ADHD to manage their day-to-day life with organizing, motivation, concentration, fluctuating moods, short fuse, overwhelmed very easily, hypersensitive, not only to touch, to taste, to sound, to movement, but also to people's judgments or criticisms. These can often be heightened in the person with ADHD. You might say something which is just a flippant remark, something that doesn't have much depth or malice to, but suddenly the ADHD will feel as if you've just completely rejected them and don't understand their feelings, and how could you? It's called rejection sensitivity disorder. So this can cause lots of problems in a relationship. If you are rejection sensitive, you may feel like you're being rejected when you're not. You may feel like your partner's being a cunt when they're not. RSD, an extreme emotional sensitivity and pain triggered by perception that a person has been rejected or criticized by important people in their life, i.e. your partner. It may also be triggered by a sense of falling short, failing to meet their own high standards or others' expectations. So can you imagine you're in a relationship with someone and because of your ADHD, they're getting frustrated because you've not done the chores, you've not done what you said you were going to do, you forgot that you were going to meet up with them, you seem careless and forgetful and you seem like you're not that invested, and then all they have to do is say something about this and suddenly you feel rejected because you're sensitive yourself, and so it can kind of spiral out of control and it can cause all sorts of resentment towards each other, and it can become quite toxic, and all because there wasn't enough communication and understanding of the disorder, which is ADHD, from both parties. This is definitely not a video to say that the person without ADHD has to be all understanding and allow the ADHDer to just be a tornado in the relationship. It's not about that. It needs to go both ways, and just as much normal neurotypical relationship, the two partners need to both respect each other and find a middle ground. I can't think of the word now. You know, when you have to give and take. What's it called? Fuck, it's gonna do my tit if I don't find it. Just like in a neurotypical relationship where there needs to be a core of trust, love, and ultimately compromise, so does there need to be compromise in an ADHD, non-ADHD relationship. And this compromise can come in many different ways. The non-ADHD might have to come to terms with the fact that their love of their life, their partner, is forgetful. They might have to come to terms with the fact that sometimes they're going to lose motivation to do the things that they said they would once do. And they also have to kind of understand that often us ADHDers will say that we're going to do something with the best intent, but then when it actually comes to it, we run into that invisible barrier which just prevents us from doing it. Fucking complicated disorder, but it's true. And even though it might look like we're lazy or we don't care, it's not about that. It's a much more complex situation. The non-ADHD may feel frustrated, but I promise you, one of the worst things you can do is to scold your ADHD partner. Telling them off, scolding them, making them feel worse, it will not go down well. If you can imagine someone with ADHD has been making these mistakes their entire life, and parents, teachers, people of seniority will have always been telling them the same bullshit, always telling them off. And if you as a partner then take that role as well, the reaction you will get 9 times out of 10 will just be, they will retreat. They will start looking at you like a teacher or like a parent, and that perception will trigger all those bad feelings from when they were kids or teenagers or young adolescents, and they will ultimately withdraw. And that's not good in any relationship, let me tell you. I've been on both sides because I have ADHD and my partner also has ADHD. So we're in quite a unique scenario. It makes it complicated and easier at the same time because we kind of understand each other, because a lot of our ADHD traits overlap and they're similar, whereas some are quite different. But honestly, the fucking most important thing that I can tell you about this is just communication. Communication. I'm aiming this really at the person with ADHD who's in a relationship with a non-ADHD or with another ADHD. By effectively communicating what's going on in your head, you give them the opportunity to understand why you're acting, reacting, or not reacting to something. So for example, if I come home and I feel overwhelmed because of the day, and then my partner starts talking to me about 3 different things at once, I could quite easily be triggered into going in my head, fuck this, I can't do this, I need a break. But if I don't say anything, I will just retreat, I might snap, I might get shitty, I might get angry. And it's not actually her fault. It's also not mine, it's just the way that I am reacting. It's my response in that moment. And if you have ADHD, you might know that there isn't much space between the trigger and the reaction. You've got about a split second to decide what you're going to do. You don't. It just happens. So by practicing communication, you can do one of 2 things. If you've got time, if you've got space, you can say to your partner, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need a minute, which takes a little bit of bravery to do because you don't want to in turn hurt your partner's feelings and seem like you don't care. But with communication, they should understand where you're coming from. But if you missed the boat on that one and you've snapped, reacted, or gone within yourself and become distant, then the second most important thing, and this is the one that I do a lot, is go back to your partner when you've cooled down and got your headspace back. Apologize and explain. The apology isn't so much because you've done anything wrong. It's more of an acknowledgement that you may have hurt your partner's feelings. We want to try and avoid blaming ourselves for the way that we are, right? Like the ADHD is the ADHD. We can't really help it. With practice and with work, we can get better, but I think you can apologize and there not be any shame or blame involved at the same time. And, and if your partner understands, the reaction you really want is, it's okay, I understand. Because that diffuses the whole fucking thing and then it's cool. And then you just carry on with your relationship and there's no like, where the fuck do I stand? Toxic behavior, all of that is gone, right? So the sad truth is a lot of relationships where there's one person or both with ADHD is that you can get into a bit of a funk where the person that doesn't have ADHD or the person that kind of steps up as the neurotypical starts trying to control the behavior of the ADHD person. So trying to make sure that chores happen, making sure to remind the ADHD of things all the time. And it quickly does get into this nagging role and this constant, feels like belittling, but it's always just on top of them, which the person without ADHD, they don't want to be in that role because that's not what a relationship's about. But also the ADHD then starts feeling a little bit shit. They start wondering where the person that they fell in love with has gone. You never want to get into this mode of one person controlling the other. I know that I sometimes have to check myself when my partner's forgotten something and I really wanted it to get done. I need to remind myself like, well, you're gutted that it didn't get done, but really, it's not that much of it's not a big deal, and it's definitely not a big enough deal to compromise the relationship. I think the person with the ADHD and the person without the ADHD have to kind of separate the disorder from the person, which is a strange thing to say because some people are like, oh, I love my ADHD and all that, and that's great, and own it, and there's parts of my ADHD that I love, but the shitty parts, you didn't choose to be that way. I could talk about this for ages, but I just want to mention a couple more points. For those of you that do not have ADHD, but you're with someone that has ADHD, another thing that you can do for your sake and for theirs is just ask questions. If you can see that there's something wrong, or if you can see that they're struggling, it goes a long way if you ask them, are you okay? Are you struggling? Are you feeling overwhelmed? If they don't know a lot about ADHD themselves, but they have it, or you think they might have it. Research about ADHD and have a look. Like, there is so much research out there on ADHD. It's one of the longest studied disorders that we have. By understanding the disorder, it goes a long way for the person with the disorder. It also makes you a better partner, really. And I think this goes even for people without disorders. Across the board, anything that we have that might make us feel isolated or misunderstood, by being understood by your partner, I mean, that will only strengthen a relationship. And if you're with someone that you really love, like, why wouldn't you fucking learn about what's going on in their brain? You know? My final point for those with ADHD, and this is a really good one, right? Even if I do say so myself, I think for those of us with ADHD, whether we're in a relationship or not, actually, one of our strongest things, one of our strongest tools, if you like, that we can own is owning our ADHD. If you're in a relationship with someone and you fucked up, you forgot something, you were supposed to meet them, just own it. You just straight up say, like, I'm sorry, I forgot, for your non-ADHD partner, by acknowledging that you did something that they might find difficult. That's important too. Because believe it or not, there are some people who don't have ADHD and still are sensitive and still have feelings and still react, and justifiably so. We are a difficult breed to be with, but fuck me, it's worth it, because we are also incredibly special. Like, I mean, I believe that so much. Everyone with ADHD I've ever met, I've clicked with, and we're just a special breed, man. And that's not to say that non-ADHDers aren't, but if you don't have ADHD and you're with someone with ADHD, granted, it might be difficult, but I feel the pros vastly outweigh the negatives, and it's just a case of working on it, understanding it, both of you, and figuring out a system. It's all about fucking systems. Me and Briggy have got 110 systems, about 5 of them work, but the ones that work makes the quality of life for both of us better, and we're constantly reevaluating how the fuck are we going to do things. You should see our laundry room. It's a joke. It's next level chaos, but we're running through it every week. We're trying to figure it out, man. And we communicate, and one day she'll be overwhelmed and I'll try and stay strong for her, and the other day I'll be overwhelmed, and I'll be honest, I'm overwhelmed a lot. I trigger very quick when I'm overwhelmed, and I really try to keep my cool externally, but I often get angry. Not at her, but just at everything around me. I create this angry aura, and she definitely sometimes feel like it's directed at her. I know that, so I try my best to, as quickly as possible, reassure her. I think these are just things that you have to figure out with each other in a relationship, like communication. Without that, you're fucked. You know, men and women speak different languages at the best of times, and different people speak different languages. I don't just mean like literally, but I mean psychologically and shit. But transparency, openness, and love and trust, and you're fucking golden. ADHD, man, it's a tricky bitch. That was my video on relationships and ADHD. I hope it made sense. It's an important bitch. I might revisit it. I might do a few interviews with ADHD people. Okay, I'm gonna go. Thanks. See you later.